Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori and me, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Welcome to your What to Read Next podcast. Today's guest is writer duo Christina Lauren. Christina and Lauren have a new book that is out this week called In the Holidaze. This is a Christmas and Groundhog Day romance, and it's really good. In this interview, Christina and Lauren share how they start writing together, what their writing process looks like, and of course, some book recommendations. Now let's go to the interview. Hi, Christina and Lauren. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast.
Hi,
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
So happy to have you both. I'm so excited to chat with you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So maybe Christina, I'll go first and then Lauren.
Okay, I am the Christina half. I'm Christina Hobbs. I live in Utah. I have one daughter. I have 3 dogs. I love bees. And I'm just super happy to be here and super lucky I get to write books with my best friends.
I love this.
Hi, I am Lauren. I am the Lauren half of Christina Lauren. I've just said Lauren 3 times, now 4. And I live in California. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, 2 dogs, a husband. I like to cook. I am a new BTS Army, thanks to Christina, who's been around for years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. We are really lucky to be able to do this together. We have a lot of fun.
I got a question. How did you 2 come together to start writing? Were you friends with them or?
So we met, like, quote unquote, met online in 2009 writing fan fiction. And then we met in person later that same year for San Diego Comic-Con. Mm-hmm. And we just like hit it off. There was just, it connected in some way. And we decided to try and write like a fun little one-shot together, you know, a fic one-shot. Mm-hmm. And we had so much fun that we were like, what if we tried writing a book? And thinking that was going to be really easy. And so we spent that summer writing a book that has not been published yet, but did eventually get us our agent, Holly Root. So, yeah, a pretty, like, we were just, you know, slush pile querying and stuff, but we got sort of the agent of our dreams.
I love this. And what kind of fan fiction were you writing? Was it Twilight or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was writing Twilight.
Okay.
Lo has written a lot more.
I've written in a lot of different fandoms. I think my first was probably Days of Our Lives when I was young. I would just like write dorky stories, but I've done Buffy and Alias and Hunger Games and Twilight. I enjoy it. It's fun.
I love this. So let's talk about that journey to get that first book published. So you got your agent from one book, but that was not the book that was published. Was The Beautiful Bastards your first book?
Yeah, so we signed Holly Root with it. It was actually a young adult novel. But in the time that we were working on submitting that to agents, 50 Shades had published. And it was, I mean, it's a long, convoluted story, but the upshot is that Christina had a really big fan fiction in the Twilight community. And because 50 Shades had itself come from fan fiction, people were both contacting her to publish it, but also other people were trying to sell it as theirs because it was written through, like, you know, a pen name. So she couldn't really connect it to her. So we decided that it had been down for years, that we would rewrite it. We would basically rip it up, kind of edit it thoroughly. I think we cut off the second half and just like completely rework the ending. And our plan was just to put it up online so that nobody could steal it. And because we had done so much work on it and it was so different, our agent was like, let's just send it out to a couple editors and see if they're interested. And it sold in like 12 hours. So it was, I mean, it's funny because that piece of it felt easy, but everything else was very much like a long process.
Yeah.
So it was sort of funny that piece went like really quickly. And I think it was really due to the romance craze at the time, you know, and it was kind of, it fit perfectly in the market. So,
So did you plan Beautiful Bastards 10 books? So did you plan all the books at once, or how did that process come about for that series?
No, I
No,
mean, we had
so
sold two. We sold two in that first contract.
Really?
And we thought, yeah. And we didn't even know that the second one, Beautiful Stranger, was going to be connected. And then we decided, okay, yeah, we'll just have it be a different character. And they sold so well that our publisher was like, hey, let's do some more. So,
mhm.
Yeah, and you've been in gallery for most of your career, or you were in other publishers?
We have three YA books with Simon and Schuster books for young readers, but all of our books have been with Simon and Schuster.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about writing. How do you write? Like, do you share? What's the process like for both of you? How do you write? I'm most curious. Like, do you write a chapter each one of you, or figure out a point of view, or how does that process?
So because there are two of us, we have to outline. Like, I just can't even imagine the nightmare that would happen if we did not outline.
Yeah.
So we usually meet in person. It's a little harder right now because like the magic that sort of happens is just not the same if we were to try and do it over Zoom. So we've been like driving to each other's houses.
Oh my gosh.
So we outline in person. We divide up it. We either, split it by chapter or point of view. Sometimes one character leans a little bit more towards one of our voices or experience or something. We write our sections. We upload them to Dropbox, and so we can reference our chapters because we usually go in order. And then at some point we combine them to see if it sort of looks like a book. And then we revise and we revise and we revise until we possibly don't think we can revise anymore. And even though we've done this, our book that comes out this October in the Holidaze is, I think, our 26th. It's still, every time we sit down to outline, feels like we sort of are doing it brand new and have never done it
no
before.
idea what we're doing. We always take a little while to get started, like, how does one book?
Yeah, every time I go, I have index cards, and we never use them.
or we're like, do we do a spreadsheet? Should we get a big piece of paper? How do we do a book?
Yeah.
So how do you go about, like, how do you run a ship as a writer? Because you have a lot of books and you probably have a lot of ideas and a lot of inspiration. How do you keep track of them all?
Well, ultimately, once we start drafting, we put all of our stuff into spreadsheets. So we might outline on index cards, we might outline on paper, we might do it a whole bunch of different ways. But once we actually start writing, we put it into a spreadsheet that breaks it down by chapter. It's where we try and track the timelines. We're usually pretty terrible with timelines, but we figured out, and thank God for copy editors. But that's where we try and put all of the information that we have so that, if we ever need to go back and reference something, it's there.
That's awesome. And so do you share your work along the way to your editor or agent or anyone before it's completed, or do you wait till you both have like a good enough draft or ready to be seen?
I mean, it sort of depends. I think we've had a couple books where we might send the first 2 or 3 chapters to our editor just to say, like this, kind of a thing. Or Lo's sister reads for us sometimes, and so she's not a huge romance reader, and so she's such a great gauge, because if we snag her from the beginning, then we know that we've done something right. So it just changes with every book. But I mean, typically we would wait until we were done before we would have our editor read it. But we do have pre-readers and that kind of thing.
That's really exciting. So let's talk about In a Holidaze. What was the source of inspiration?
I think, we've never done a holiday book, and they're fun. I think one of the things about books around that time of year is you're allowed a little bit of magic. And so, Christina and I, in our adult fiction, we write contemporary, right? We don't, in our YA, we have a couple paranormal stories, but everything else that we do is contemporary. And so we don't really bend the rules too much of our world. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes it's fun to do something a little different. So we liked the idea of a time loop. I had seen, and I think Christina had seen it before or right after me, but we saw it around the same time we saw Happy Death Day. And I don't know if you've seen that movie, but it's really funny. She basically keeps getting murdered, and she has to figure out what is causing it, who's killing her. And obviously we don't write that kind of book, but the idea of doing Happy Death Day but romantic, it was really fun for us. Like, how can we have somebody who keeps going back to a certain point in time until she gets it right? And so it just sort of unrolled from there.
Yeah,
it's a brilliant movie. You should watch it.
It's really cute. Yeah.
I'm gonna add it to my TBR of like movies to watch. And I'm curious, like the whole time travel process, like what was the process like to just figure out like which ones get repetitive and which ones are like the little twists and turns, that really
yeah, I mean it was hard, honestly, because when you do it in a movie, you can speed through time by just showing a flash of images, right? So you can bring the viewer up to speed for where you were in the last point in time, right? But in a book, you have to do that with words, and that can be a lot of work for a reader if you do it in a way that you make them read the same thing over and over. And so as much as we could, we tried to shortcut that so that we were pulling May back to the situation, which was on an airplane, and then jumping forward again in time so that she would wake up on the plane, and then we would cut and then move to, the end of the last scene that we just saw, but she had just gone through it yet again. And it was tricky. I mean, it took a lot of editing. I think it works. There's going to be a little bit of repetition, but I don't think it's irritating repetition. I hope it's funny.
No, I think it's funny. It's like, oh, okay, we're back in the same place. And it really is like, you're like little twists because you're like little small details that like change the story. And like some detail that would change the whole trajectory. And you're like, oh, okay. So,
right. And, the more May does it, the more sort of unhinged she becomes. And then that influences what everyone else around her is thinking and feeling. And so, that has an effect, obviously, on what happens with Andrew, that May has to get to a point where she just doesn't give a crap anymore. And she's just sort of speaking her mind. And that's what he's responding to. So it's fun. It's fun to watch that happen.
Yeah. So, and I love the theme of the family because it's a family vacation and there's family friends. It's like a whole set of college parents, friends from college. They've been spending holidays together for like 20 something years together, and they're in the house and the family scene and the Benny, like it was just like a fun theme. And it was unique enough for a romance, but I think it makes sense for Christmas romance to have the theme of family. What was it important to share this part of the story?
So this is Lauren. So I grew up with a big group of friends, family friends like this. They were actually my parents' friends that they had met when my sister and I were in preschool. And so all of the kids were the same age. So we all grew up together. We'd known each other since we were like 3 or 4. And we would go on vacations together. We always had a Christmas party together. It was never so close that we would rent like a house over the holidays together. But we definitely did vacation, spend a ton of time together. I see them whenever I go home. And so I think kind of trying to weave that into a book was important to me because that was such a huge part of my own story growing up, was this group of people that were sort of like chosen family. We weren't super close to my grandparents on either side, either for proximity or just emotional stuff. And so, having this chosen family in our life was really awesome. And so it was just kind of a fun way to put that into a book, and for sure, like growing up, there was that one of the guys in the group that was just like adorable, and I had a crush on him my entire life. So glad that we didn't end up together, but it's funny to think about like how it would have, how it would play out in the book.
Yeah, I love May's journey. Go from one brother and be like, oh, okay, hold on. Crash and be like, oh, I want to change my life. Like I want to change it back. Like that was
yeah.
So, yeah, it's like, I think it's a play to, well, it's not brother's best friend, but kind of like in that realm of best friend, brother.
Yep.
So that was fun. Will you write other Christmas books after writing this book, or is it something that you're like, okay, been there, done that, moving forward?
I mean, I could see us doing it. It's funny, when we started writing this, it was last summer, and it's hard to get in the the like mind frame of Christmas
Totally
when it's
is.
like 100 degrees outside.
Yeah.
Do you remember I had to make a playlist of like rain and windy sounds here because we're writing it from like August, October, which is basically Southern California summer. And it was like
Yeah.
90 degrees out, and I had to put on these like torrential rain playlists just to imagine that it was like winter.
Yeah. I remember I was watching like Hallmark Christmas movies and stuff, like the Christmas in July or whatever it was. And,
Yeah.
and it's just hard. You just, like, what do I put Christmas lights out, or, what do I do?
Yeah.
So when we got around to edits, it was a lot easier because the weather had changed.
Yeah. I mean, I think for any book that, whether it's continuing a series or doing another series or doing another enemies to lover or doing another like holiday book, the question is always just, if we had the idea and it felt like when we had to write down, like we couldn't get out of our heads, we would do it. But we're not going to like sit down and be like, okay, let's plot another, like our next holiday book. It's about following the story that we want to tell.
I like that. I like the idea of like trusting your intuition and trusting each other and to figure out the next story as opposed to trying to figure out like push yourself to do it. Just letting it unravel perfectly in the proper process.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions for the Patreon community. So your romance readers who are avid fans of your work. Most of us have read pretty much all of the books. Consume them, as you keep bringing them in. So one of them is, would you do books for type characters from some of your standalones? Like a good example is on Honeymooners. There's a cousin there, and then My For a Half Nightstand has a couple of other side characters. Will you think of doing some maybe inviting stories, or you just the story is complete as standalone or moving forward?
I don't know. We don't have any plans right now. It's funny because for Half Night, I cannot tell you how many people asked if we are going to do the guys from My Favorite Half Nightstands.
Yeah.
If we're going to write their stories, and we've never like planned it. We used to write more series. We don't write as many anymore because it's kind of fun. It can be intimidating when you have like a big series and people have to read something, even though, the majority of our even series books can be read as standalones. It's just scary for people to see this giant stack of brightly colored books, So I think if we were going to write one, our book that comes out next year has, I think, maybe one of our favorite side characters we've ever written. And I could totally see writing about her, but it's not something that we've planned or anything.
I feel you. Yeah, I feel like series are kind of like it depends on the audience. Like, there are people who hate them, so you're just like, I just want to read a standalone, just read the whole story and just move on. And then there's people like me who's like, I'll just binge read 30 books in a series. And I'm like, every single character, every side character, every person on the street who gets a love story, that sounds good for me. It's a process. I feel like as an author, it can be intimidating because you have to keep track of all the details of, ages, characters, so I can imagine it's probably like,
I think the hardest thing is in a long series, you have a lot of characters to juggle. So like, for example, in Beautiful, the last of the Beautiful Bastard series, like we had 5 couples, and so, and at the end, everybody wanted all of them in a room together. So you have 10 people speaking plus George and George's will. And so it's like, you have so many characters that you've built, which is so great. And you love them like they are real. And if you've done a good job, your readers also feel that they're real. So you don't want to give them an unsatisfying ending, but it is it becomes unwieldy. You really do have a lot of people to put in a scene.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't realize there were like 10 couples or 10 people in the first. I know like there were 5 couples because I read them, but it was like, it just doesn't, as a reader, it's like, oh yeah, I want to see their story. And we're like, okay, what happened? So the other question that we got was about your sexy times in your stories. Especially in your earlier series, there's a lot of more. What was the writing process for those? Like, how do you set those scenes?
I remember somebody asked us once if we write them together, and the answer is no.
No.
I remember we tried It wasn't even a love scene. It was just like a scene of two people sitting in a diner. And we were both on Google Doc, and we were like, I'll type a line and you type a line. And it was the most awkward, uncomfortable thing. Like, we were both like, let's never speak of this again. It was awful. So like, I think one thing that Lo and I both tend to do when we write sex scenes is close our eyes. And that way you are just seeing it in your head as opposed to seeing words on the page.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard because I could write a really filthy, dirty sex scene. The ones that are more like a little less on the page are so much harder for me. It's like I either have to be one extreme or the other. I struggle so much in the middle, where thank God Lo is so good at, like, she can do all of it, because she can write some filthy stuff, but she can also write that like perfect middle of the road kind of, you know, saying some but not saying all of it. But
which is hilarious, because you wrote the sex scene in On Honeymooners, and that's like a super tame.
It's like
you
the
know,
most closed door.
Yeah.
But you know, it's easier. Sometimes I think it's easier to just be just filthy than it is to be like tastefully restrained and sexy. So,
well, because you can, it's harder to get a lot. I mean, one of the things that we always say about the scenes is you can have as many as them as you want in a book. You can have one per chapter, but it has to do something for the story. It can't, you either have to move your characters forward emotionally or backwards emotionally. They cannot be in the exact same place emotionally after a sex scene. And so, you know, that's the thing, is like, if you write a really filthy scene, that's totally fine, but you have to do something with it. It has to accomplish something. And I think that that's easier to do when you can be explicit and you can show them reacting to things and feeling things and all. Exactly. But it's harder to do when you have to keep it very restrained, because, you know, you're using fewer words, you're using fewer actions, and it's just harder.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. It makes so much sense. Like, thinking about it after you read the scene, like, you think about it like, did it brought the couple together, or did it just, you know, fall apart? And the reality is that, you know, the more explicit, you can actually know what's going on in your head, what's going on, you know, and the reactions, as opposed to that you may not know, and you just, it leads to the reader's imagination, which is good, you know. But I think it's from as readers, we're used to just seeing the act of intimacy is just getting deeper in the relationship. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's,
and, you know,
really
everybody
funny.
has their own taste.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's really funny to see that there are some people who really want really explicit, sexy books. And then there are some people who don't. And then there are some people who are happy with like a middle ground. And really, we really have to make it be right for the character. Some of our characters are just a lot dirtier. Some aren't. Like when we were writing on Honeymooners, our agent, who is typically not like, give it to me dirtier, you know, that's not typically her, was like, I think that you could use another sex scene in here. So we wrote something that was more explicit, and it just didn't work. It just did not feel like them. So exactly what Lo says, it just depends on the characters, and it's got to actually do something for the story. It can't just be like, okay, they had sex, check mark.
Right.
Because sometimes having sex doesn't solve anything.
Right. Sometimes it makes things more complicated. And what I hate more than anything is when all of the sex scenes read the same from book to book to book. It's just the same thing. So you really do have to listen to your characters and figure out, like, you know, because Chloe and Sarah in the Beautiful series are very different women. They're not going to have the same kind of sex life, you know? So trying to imagine like what they would be like behind closed doors, you know, that's part of the fun of writing romance, is you figure out these people.
So how do you uncover the characters? Like, do they speak to you, or do they just, like, you start to realize, like, as you write the story or as you write the outline, this character?
I think we know them when we outline, but we don't know them yet. Like we feel like we do, but then once you start writing them is really when you get to know them, because that's when you're in their heads, right? So you can outline their story and say, well, this is how so-and-so is going to feel at this point. But until you're actually at that chapter 12 and you're, you know, knee deep in their story, like, you don't really know them. So, you know, the first pass of drafting, we always really get to know the characters. And then a lot of our editorial process is going back and making them feel fully realized from page one.
That's fascinating. So what are some of your upcoming projects?
So we have in a Holidaze, obviously, is out October 6th. We have a book that is done. We are doing copy edits on it right now that will come out next spring, but they have not announced the title or anything about it yet. So we're very excited that we think it might be like our best book yet. So we're very excited for them to announce that. And then we're planning our book that we're going to write for after that book. So
I love this. This is so exciting. So
it is exciting. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Now let's go to random book recommendations. This is an opportunity for you to share with the audience what they should read next. What is your favorite genre?
I love reading nonfiction. I love lit fic, and I love romance. So some of my favorite nonfiction authors, I mean, I always talk about Eric Larson because he's amazing. There's also a biography of Catherine the Great by Robert K. Massey that is seriously amazing. I would listen to the audiobook. It's just like so good. But right now I'm reading a book called Fleischman is in Trouble. And that is great. I just finished Daring and the Duke by Sarah MacLean, and that is a historical romance. It is the third in the series, the Bare Knuckle Bastard series. The first one is Wicked and the Wallflower, and it is amazing. And then another recommendation I have is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. It's so good. It's like voicey and swoony and sweet and hilarious. I loved it. And then for pre-order for everybody, I would tell you to pre-order Love It First by Kate Claiborne. It comes out in February of 2021, and it is just beautifully written. Just really, really beautifully written.
Thank you.
So obviously I love romance because I love kissing books. But the genre that I tend to read more for sort of like escape is the thriller genre. I love Sherry Lapina. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. So one of my favorite books last year was Someone We Know, which I'm still, I keep waiting for Lo to read it, but I think
I can't find my copy. No.
Oh.
I can't find it. I was so into it.
And then I just finished The End of Her came out like just a couple weeks ago, and I read it the week that it came out. As far as romance, I just read all 638 pages of Midnight Sun. I had to. That's my, we've been waiting for that book forever, so I just finished that. And then I think my favorite book that's on pre-order right now is called Heart and Soul by Jen Frederick, and it's about an adoptee, a Korean adoptee who goes to Korea to kind of find her family, and it's good, like so swoony and sweet and just interesting. I love it, and I think it's out, like May 11th or something.
Oh, this is so exciting! So tell us where we can find you online.
So we can be found at Christina Lauren Books is our website, right? And our Twitter and Instagram are both at Christina Lauren. And then our Facebook is Christina Lauren Books. Is that on Facebook?
I think it's just Christina Lauren.
Christina Lauren. And then we do have a Facebook group. It's a really fun community. It's called CeeLo and Friends. So we encourage anybody to come on over and hang out. We talk books and K-dramas and K-dramas and all of the fun stuff. So
yeah.
I love this. Thank you, Christina and Lauren, for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, or rate and review the show. This is the easiest way to support this podcast. Want to join a romance-loving community? Want weekly book recommendations, monthly author Q&As, and book recommendation meetups? Make new friends? Then join our Patreon community. To sign up, please follow the links in the show notes. What to Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts to love on frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.